Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi here at 10:22 Eastern Time. I thought I'd jump in. I had some time, and we have this this tropical wave that's been around for well over a week now that moved off the African coast, washed its way across, somehow managed to hold together in spite of hostile conditions, and never developed the way the models said it would develop when it was out in the tropical Atlantic. But now that it's east of the Bahamas, we've seen some organization today and this evening, and the Hurricane Center has indicated that this may be tropical depression may be developing. So we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to discuss the upper level winds as well. And I just want to show you why this is no real threat to land, and what you would really need to see going forward as far as how a tropical system becomes a threat to at least the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. So here we go with that, and then when that's done, we'll come back and we'll do some chatting. So hang on, here we go. All right, folks, let's take a look at what's happening with respect to the system that's east of the Bahamas, which are right here. This is 75 degrees west, and here's 70 west. So it's pretty much already lined up east of Cape Cod, if you want to draw a straight line all the way up. We have here a rather large concentration of showers and thunderstorms, and notice on the satellite loop you can start to see the convection is hooking around on the northeast side and coming back to the north side. Clouds are turning counterclockwise. So it looks to me like there's a mid-level circulation, and the Hurricane Center actually did indicate in their latest update that a low-level circulation may be developing here. So this could very well become a tropical depression, and it may even ultimately become a tropical storm. But notice that it's moving, it looks like to me it's moving north-northwestward already, so it doesn't seem like it's going to get any closer to the Bahamas. It's no threat there, and it is no threat to the United States. Here's the perspective wider, so you can see here's Florida, the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. It's sitting well away from any of these areas, and again, it looks like it's moving north-northwest. And also notice that you have clouds moving off the east coast as this next cold front is getting ready to move offshore, and that is really going to be the wall where the tropical system is just going to basically move northward and then northeastward ahead of that weather front. By the way, right here is the edge of a tropical wave that is moving off that's moved off the African coast and is south of the southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. But I just want to point out, at least right now, and this is important because of the fact that the GFS has this as a tropical storm in less than 96 hours, but you still have issues here. And when this system came off as a tropical wave, if you remember, the weather models went, well, the GFS anyway, and the Canadian to some extent, not the European, went bonkers with this very quickly and developed it into a major hurricane before it even got near the leewards. It's been doing that for the last number of runs, but you know, I'm looking at all of this, and you've got an upper air setup that's a little different than the last time, but there are similarities, and this is the one big one, is that you have dry air all out here through the tropical Atlantic. Now, the wave is pretty far to the south. Let me get that off. The wave is embedded in this area of moisture, so it is moving to the west, but you got to wonder if a circulation develops out of this, that you're going to eventually wind up with issues here with respect to that dry air getting entrained into any developing low. In the meantime, you have this upper low that's up to the north. This one's a little different. The last one kind of came down like this, all the way down, and then eventually moved to the southwest, moved away in this direction. This one here is elongated northeast southwest, so it's more like this. And I don't believe that the strong wind shear extends far enough south to impact it. So from the standpoint of the upper level winds, the environment may be a little bit more conducive for development. But from the standpoint of that dry air, it is going to be a problem. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. And let me now we'll move on in terms of what the models are showing with the tropical depression off the East Coast. And you can see, you can barely see the East Coast here on the map. From New Jersey northeastward, you can see, but notice the track. It's all the models take this north-northwest and then turn it northeastward out into the open waters of the Atlantic. So it really has no impact on land. Maybe it will kick up some rough surf over time. Now, why is this the case? Why is this not moving up the East Coast? Well, let me show you why with respect to the upper air winds. And if you, we're looking at the upper air winds here at 500 millibars or 18,000 feet. So it's about halfway up the atmosphere. And the winds along the East Coast, at least overnight, are south-southwest. Here's the upper high. And here's our little tropical system. So there's the alleyway where it moves around the periphery of the upper high and out. It gets caught in this strong band of westerly winds. Now, when we go forward in time, those westerly winds along the East Coast do not decrease. So there's no reason for us to even worry about the fact that this is going to wind up going to a land area. It's going to be pushed out to the east. And notice as we go forward through this week, you still have mainly westerly winds from North Carolina on northward. The upper high does build. It's narrow, but it does build back into the Gulf states. So you have this large upper high in the Atlantic that wants to build back to the west. Now, this will, at least if there is a tropical system that develops that's coming, that came off the African coast, it probably will have a westward component of motion at least for a while. It's going to respond to the ridge, but the ridge is narrow, and there may be weaknesses there that we can't see at this point. And the model actually does pick up on a weakness and does the same thing with this, where it lifts it up in response to those westerly winds once again developing across the eastern part of the United States. So at least from this model run and the others, I would say that if something were to come out here, the odds would probably favor recurvature. Now, if you have this trough, this next trough, if this winds up being something more like this, then that's a different story, okay? But there's no indication of that being the case. No other model shows the possibility of a deep trough like that. So we're going to discount that and just go along with what's in front of us at this point, in that any other tropical system that comes out will be going out to the east. So stick around here. We'll chat a little bit about whatever you'd like. So just hang on and give me a chance to switch over, and we will talk for a few minutes. Okay, here we go. So you can see with respect to the upper level winds that are going to develop, that are already there along the East Coast, that this system off the Bahamas has got nowhere to go but north and then northeast and out. Of course, there's a lot of questions down the road and a lot of variabilities with the next tropical wave that's moving out. So we don't even know whether that's going to develop or not. We're just kind of going on what the model, what the GFS and the Canadian model is showing. The European really shows very little with that. I mean, you could probably pick out a kink in the isobars where there might be some kind of weak low there, but it doesn't develop it into anything. So the European continues, at least from the standpoint of tropical systems, to outperform the other two models. So we have to assume that until the European tells us that there's something going to be there, that anything the other models do is rather suspect. Now, I will say, I'm just looking at the NAM model run from this evening and just taking a look at that. It does develop a closed low level circulation, and at least the new NAM now, I mean, it does have it as a tropical storm well east of Jackson. If you draw a line east of Jacksonville and draw another line south of Montauk, right out there is where it would be centered, and that's at 48 hours. So that's the new NAM. Let me just go backward so we can take it out a little further. So it's about in the same spot, and it moves it. From there it goes northeast and out, probably as a strong tropical depression or a tropical storm, but it really doesn't do too much with it. So, we're following it. A lot of this is good practice for me because when one of these days we are probably going to see something that's going to look like a legitimate threat for somebody, and at least we'll have a pattern here developing in terms of when I'm going to live stream and how I'm going to do it. So, it's good work for me to do in preparation. Dave Schwartz wants to know, what is the next shot of rain for New York City? The garden has been loving the summer, lots of tomatoes. Yeah, the tomato crop's been pretty good this year. I've had a few. They've been quite good. Doesn't look like anything's going to happen. Tuesday we might see some clouds come up from the south from the cold front stalling out and the wave that's going to try to develop on it. So that might bring some clouds close by. But the next warm front, cold front combination doesn't arrive until later Thursday night, and Friday. So that's when we'll probably get into the next chance for some showers and some thunderstorms. And the late afternoon run of the GFS, basically continues this flow across southern Canada and the northern part of the United States, where we keep getting, these weather systems coming through every couple of days or so in the long range, not building any kind of ridge along the East Coast, at least from that model run. So, I've been saying all along, the trend is your friend, so I'm not going to go against that until I see some evidence otherwise. Joseph Harcourt, welcome. What are you thinking for September in terms of Atlantic tropical activity relative to average? Well, judging from what we're seeing right now, I think we're going to probably have above normal activity. We're almost into the middle of August here. We've had a name, if we have two named storms during the month of August, that would be average. So I think that we'll probably get that. I think September may wind up being busy, and I would not be surprised if at some point we have 2 or 3 tropical systems running around at the same time. So my guess, based on the way the activity has been in the tropics so far, being that we've had an above average year, an above average hurricane season, that I think we're probably going to see an active period at some point during the month of September. The next tropical wave would get caught by the jet stream and dragged eastward. Yeah, if it winds up developing and getting far enough west, ultimately the jet stream, that northern jet is so prominent and dominant that, yeah, if it's going west to east, it's going to get picked up and it's going to go up and out. Now, what might prevent that is if for some reason that jet is a lot weaker and further north, if the ridge in the Atlantic is stronger and further west, then you may have more of a westward component of motion. But these are problems that we cannot determine. These are issues that we cannot resolve 7 to 10 days in advance. These are issues that come when we're inside the 5-day period, and we're a long way from that. So let's, we're going to have to we'll just see how models evolve through all of this. Mystery Gamer wants to know about York, Pennsylvania tomorrow. You should have a nice day tomorrow, I think, with some sunshine and temperatures into the low to mid 80s. Should be pretty good. Humidity, I think, will be fairly reasonable. 2009, I have to look back. That was one of the coolest on record. I don't, honestly, I don't remember, but I'll have to look back on that. Hi to Paul Sack. Do I make sauce from fresh garden tomatoes or canned? I do both, by the way. I like to use San Marzano tomatoes when I make my sauce, which I haven't done in a long time. That might be an idea for tomorrow. Maybe I'll make some. I actually have some jarred sauce from a family member that has been sitting in my cabinet for a while that he made from tomatoes he grew back last year. So that should be really ready to go. So I think maybe that might be something for me to do tomorrow. Delvin, I don't know what's on the current radar as far as Boston is concerned, but you're going to be dry for tomorrow, I would think. Yeah, well, yeah, no rain for Boston anyway, at least through until Thursday. And the upper air pattern flipped to no rain. No, I don't know that it flipped to no rain. I just think that these weather systems that have been moving through have not been especially strong. So they haven't been, big rain producers and severe weather producers. I mean, we did have one earlier this week, but they're limited in scope. Some places get them, some places don't, and that's why we've been kind of dice rolling. Abacus says everyone is asking about rain, and I'm in I'm in Southern California. I'm sorry, Southern California. Lots of laughs. Sorry, guys. Yeah, well, you had your rain all winter into the spring, so yeah, this is your quiet time. Ryan Ford, welcome. Why don't regular upper air storms react to weaknesses in the atmosphere like tropical systems do? Well, they do. We just don't necessarily pay as much attention to that. There are weaknesses that show up in the atmosphere at all levels, and upper level systems respond to those weaknesses as much as low level systems respond to weaknesses. But we don't really look at the upper air quite that deep. We're looking at it with perspective to how it drives the surface and not necessarily how it's driving the upper air, although it could be relevant, if when we get into the jet stream, we get serious with the jet stream with certain storms, or in the wintertime with winter storms. I don't see any early fall outbreak for Boston either. Why don't we wait till we get to the end of the month to see what the upper air pattern is going into September before we make any judgment calls about what the autumn is going to be like. A little too early to figure that part of the equation. Is there a ridge jet stream? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. I mean, the ridge that builds pushes the jet stream up further north, so you do have upper level winds on the northern part of that ridge, in the upper high, but inside the high itself, no, the winds are light. But when the ridge pushes up, let's see if I can get, try to get a shot here on the camera. So if your ridge is pushing up, the area up here is where your stronger upper level winds are. The strongest part of the ridge is here, so I'll make it like a fist, and then up here is where your upper air jet stream is going. Okay, I hope that explained that. Would I rather have another great blizzard of 77, or I assume you mean the blizzard of 78, Alvaro Bonilla, or another heat wave like the 36? Okay, so you're playing it on two extremes. So I guess, I don't take heat very well anymore, so I'm going to go with the blizzard instead. Okay, I'm not good with 10 or 12 days of 90 degrees plus. There is fog, correct? Check Boston radar line. Rain won't get to Boston. Is there fog? There might be some patchy fog until the front pushes through. I really didn't give Boston's weather a good look this evening. Raymond, what type of setup do you need for a decent late season severe thunderstorm event like Labor Day '98? All right, I got to go back and look at that because I really don't know. I don't actually remember the Labor Day '98 severe weather outbreak, but if you've got a strong cold front with good upper level support and a good buildup of heat in the northeast, with a big ridge that might be in position, gradually pulling off and giving way to a very deep trough, that might do it, especially if you've got a nice cool air mass behind it and good, strong inflow and good instability. That's probably how it could happen. I don't see how that's going to happen with the kind of pattern we have because the systems haven't been all that strong. They've been stronger up further north with the upper low, where the upper lows are, but the southern parts of the troughs have not been that strong lately. Delvin, Bermuda High Ridge, deep trough south-north flow. Okay, so you'd have to have a strong Bermuda High offshore, correct, and then a deep trough to your west. that creates a strong southerly flow along the east coast. And it's got to be a north-south trough so that you can create those southerly winds. If you have a northeast-southwest trough, you're not going to have that. You need a good north-south trough, a good orientation north to south, and a strong ridge out in the Atlantic. And you also need a strong ridge on the Pacific side. So it's got to be supported on both ends. If the Pacific ridge is probably a little more important. If the Pacific ridge is weak or for some reason it's strong but then gets dented by something coming into the Pacific Northwest, that could flatten the trough out. And then you don't have the southerly flow that you would like. Okay, so you had an overnight D-echo on the Labor Day 98. Yeah, you know what, Raymond, you got me. You got me at an advantage here because I really don't remember that far back. I used to be so good at remembering all these weather events, and I'm just not good at this enough anymore. Does the Euro model have any biases? If so, what are they? Well, all the models have biases. Lately, the Euro model has had a bias here in the east. It's had a bias with being too far north and west with these fronts to the south and waves developing on it. The other day, it was pushing all this rain from up off the ocean from Monday into Tuesday, and it was giving 2 to 4 inch rains from New Jersey to southern New England, and that's not happening. And that's the second or third time that it's done that in the last 3 weeks or so. So the Euro is northwest bias or left bias, as I Can Troll You Now has just posted. He is correct. The Euro does have tends to have a left bias, a warm bias. So the problem is, if you account for the warm, sometimes you account for the warm bias. It is right on occasion with that warm bias. So you got to be careful. Because then that could wind up messing up your forecast big time. Ryan Ford, if the cold front was further west toward land when a hurricane approaches, would that act like? Well, yeah, if you had the front stalled out, say just inland of the coast in a north-south fashion, yeah, that would create an alleyway east of the front. You would be in the tropical air, so the tropical system would likely move along east of that front. Yes, that is correct. Your description is correct. And the GFS does like to create ridge biases, although, the GFS used to have a warm bias, and then they did something to it, and then it had a cold bias, and, the biases sometimes change over time depending on what kind of overall pattern you're in. So they're not always the same. And as a forecaster, you have to be alert to the fact that those biases can change from time to time. So you have to exercise some caution. All right, so let's call it a night. 2 live streams in one day. We'll come back tomorrow. We'll watch the system overnight to see how it develops, and it will be for just weather geek amusement only, because it doesn't look like it's going to be any kind of problem. And we'll take a look at things on Sunday. I'm thinking tomorrow it will be a nighttime live stream. Although if something should happen tomorrow morning, if I've got some time, I may do one in the morning with respect to the tropical system. We'll do something like this. So just keep alert. I'll schedule a live stream on the and that'll be posted. But beware that there might be a surprise. So everybody, thank you, Joe. Good night, and you sleep well. Also, I'm going to go have a cigar first. And Mystery Gamer, bye to you. Good night to Jacob. And thank you very much, all of you, for being here. If you're new to my YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe to it. It's for free. And turn on your notifications so you get notified when I'm either doing a live stream or if we are taping on that day for whatever reason. Because sometimes, I get a little busy, and it's just easy to record it and then put it up rather than live stream. All right, have a great evening, folks. We'll talk to you on Sunday.